now and welcome you officially. So, Sholom Aleichem, I'm Ann Tobak, the CEO of the Workers' Circle, and I am pleased to be welcoming you to today's program, a briefing on recent changes to retirement plan rules. Throughout the year at the Workers' Circle, we offer programs around Jewish culture, social justice activism, and Yiddishkeit. And we also like to provide our community with important life-related information, such as on retirement and estate planning. And today, we're very pleased to present our planned giving consultant, the attorney Jonathan Gudema, to give some guidance on how to make sure your retirement savings meet your retirement goals. Jonathan has over 22 years of experience working with and advising nonprofit organizations and their donors on planned gift arrangements and tax-advantaged charitable estate planning options. Additionally, Jonathan is a member of the New York Bar and serves as in-house counsel to a family wealth office where he oversees over $500 million in wealth transfers since 2007. In 2011, Jonathan launched Planned Giving Advisors LLC, where he provides consulting services to nonprofit planned giving programs while he continues his work at the Family Wealth Office. Jonathan is also the author of the Planned Giving blog, which provides news and commentary on the field of planned giving with over 1,700 subscribers and 175,000 visitors since its launch. There's going to be time at the end of this talk to ask questions, but you're also welcome after this Zoom to send an email to info@circle.org and our staff will coordinate with Jonathan to get you answers. So thank you again for joining us. Welcome, Jonathan, and I turn the Zoom presentation over to you.
Thank you, Anne. Okay, hope everyone can see my screen. All right, thank you for the nice introduction. Okay, so we've done these presentations once or twice a year with the Workers' Circle, and it's my pleasure to be back. Today's is really two parts. Really, we're going to talk about some of the changes that happened at the end of last year in terms of retirement plans. Some of them coincide with charitable giving and planned giving, and also we'll talk about some of the basics of what I call planned giving and some basic legacy issues that I just like to discuss with people, just get it out there. But what I've done here, I've given the end of the year, the Omnibus tax package that was passed included, I don't know how many thousands of pages it was, but there were a lot of changes to retirement plan rules. I've only picked out the things that I feel are relevant to us, to you, to the audience. But anyway, you can always get questions to me if there's something you want me to research a little further. Okay, so we're going to cover a couple simple ideas about legacy giving, basics of estate planning, really short. Then we'll go into, again, it's called the Secure Act 2.0, which is the nickname for some of the changes to retirement plan. Within that end of year tax package, the Omnibus spending package, there's something called the Legacy IRA Act. So we're going to go a little more deeply into that because that directly affects gives you a new option for charitable giving through your IRA. And lastly, just thinking about your personal legacy. If you want to ask a question during the presentation, feel free to use the chat feature. I should get a notice. And hopefully, if I see a little notice or somebody stops me, of Ann or the staff at Workers' Circle say, "Oh, Jonathan, there's a question," they can read out the question. But otherwise, wait to the end, and I'll try to answer questions then. Okay, so a couple simple ideas. I decided to put into. I get this coming up a lot. What is estate planning? And it's really simple, but it's always worthwhile to review just so we know. Okay, number one, last will and testament. I put here required. There are a lot of people these days have figured out, hey, why don't I just divide up my estate, what's called beneficiary designations, and changing title on things, and what do I even need a last will for? Well, the answer is you need it, just in case, because your heirs will still have to find any assets that are left in your name that are not distributed through beneficiary designations or changing of title. So just a really good idea. Have a will. Obviously, you can add different things to a will, not just family. You can add Worker Circle, other nonprofits for legacy giving. And, you just sort of make sure that there's a will that even if you've given away most of your assets through these other vehicles, just like to put it out there. And you really have to have a lawyer work with you to create a will. I'm a lawyer myself, but, I'm not pushing the law profession, but it just, even though you could do a will, you can really do it yourself. You can find a do-yourself version online, or you can buy a product, but you should always have a lawyer at least review it with you at a minimum. Preferably, you'll probably just hire a lawyer and let them help you do it and draft it for you. Now, there's something called a revocable living trust. That's a will substitute. And you've probably heard about that. It's been around for many, many years. It's really the same thing as a will, except a couple big exceptions there. This is where you create the will, the trust while you're alive. You put all your assets into the trust, or as many assets as possible in the name of the trust. You basically, it's in lieu of you, and you use that to pay your bills. The checks will come from the Ann Toback Living Trust or Ann Toback Trust, and then upon your passing, whatever's in that trust then will be distributed according to the details in the trust. I put here as optional. There was a lot of push for these things. These things are not really needed. It is nice. It can be helpful in terms of organizing yourself for retirement planning, because also the living trust, if you get disabled, then you're usually your own trustee of your own living trust, because essentially it's just in lieu of you. It's your same tax ID number. It's your same social security number on the trust. But if something happens to you, you're not able to make decisions, your alternate trustee will step in and can manage everything with a lot more ease than what's called the power of attorney, which we'll talk about in a second. So there's some advantages in that regard. Obviously, it's a reduction of probate costs and expenses, but almost likely there still will be a probate estate, which means that these were touted as avoid probate to a revocable living trust. Well, at the end of the day, someone's going to have to file a will anyway in most cases. And but the living trust is helpful for those people who are going to take their estate planning very seriously. And so you can review it every other year and you make changes. And so it is a positive thing. I'm just saying I put it as optional because it's not a needed thing. The Living Will Healthcare Directive, that's again on healthcare matters, decisions, end of life decisions, your preferences plus the person you choose to help make those decisions when you can't make those decisions. So it's very important to have one of those and update those regularly. And the person you choose to make the decision should know you're supposed to talk to them about it, and discuss it, and share with them the healthcare directive so they know what your wishes are. Power of attorney, I mentioned already. Power of attorney is again where you've lost you don't have the ability to make decisions for yourself. This is somebody who can handle your finances. So it's very important. It's also you gotta be careful of the power of attorney, because when you fill that form out and you hand it to the person who you give it to, that person literally can go open, go to your bank and do business in lieu of you. So you got to be careful, but it's a very important document because, again, if you're not able to do things, you need somebody close to you who can take care of things, pay bills, help organize things. So just an important small piece of a basic estate plan. And what I feel is not discussed a lot, but I feel this is probably the most important thing you can do for your family is an inventory of assets, detailed inventory, accounts, account numbers, contacts, what's in those accounts, where they can be, how they can be accessed, passwords, things like that. Again, this stuff becomes, nowadays things are so complex in the world that if you don't have a significant inventory of assets and where these things are, family could be searching for many years. And quite often a lot of assets will just end up in unclaimed assets. It may never be claimed, and eventually the state will get it. So really important to have an ongoing list of where's your assets. Another good part about that is that you sit down with a lawyer or a financial planner or an accountant, you have that list too, and they can sort of give you advice based on all your assets. So important to know what you have. And just a couple of things before we get into the Secure Act 2.0, just simple ways to create a legacy gift. And that's really my business, is working with individuals and helping them create what's called a planned gift or a legacy gift. The easiest way is including a nonprofit, Worker Circle, or any other similar qualified nonprofit, in a will or trust, meaning a living trust. Simple and very effective. And that's really over 85-90% of the whole field of planned giving, which is about $30 billion year business, if you want to call it a business in America. Almost all of that is all bequests and trusts. That's the simplest, easiest way to create your own legacy. IRA beneficiary. Now, this is another option that has gotten more and more popular. Your IRAs, I'm going to talk a little bit IRAs now because we're going to come back to IRAs. But again, remember, IRA funds are, and also could also be other retirement accounts. All those funds are, again, pre-tax, meaning it has not yet been taxed. When you put the money into your IRA, or you put money into your 401k or 403b, the funds were not taxed. So it feels like a tax break at the beginning, but the problem is that the good news is you don't get taxed during the growth period. It could be a long period of growth, hopefully, but you do get, somebody gets taxed upon the withdrawal. The exception being a charity. So if you decide you're thinking about a legacy gift and you have IRA accounts, you may want to dedicate one or part of one to a nonprofit. That's a nice way to do a legacy gift also. So instead of you could do it on top of the will, or instead of the will, you could include a nonprofit there. And then there's avoidance of taxes, meaning if it's going to Worker Circle, there will be no income tax owed because Worker Circle is a not-for-profit tax exempt entity. We'll get back to IRAs later because of a bunch of new things in IRAs that we'll be talking about. Something called Charitable Gift Unity. We're going to talk about that also because that's part of the new Legacy IRA Act. I will describe that when I get there because that I want to give a little more attention to when we get to the presentation. And lastly, I just mentioned life insurance. Life insurance is an interesting option. I've mentioned here no longer needed policies. I actually am working with a donor for a different organization this past week he's younger. He's my age. He's 55, but he wants to be on board with a $100,000 gift. So he's actually talking to an insurance person who's going to help him set up a $100,000 policy, second to die policy, and that's another type of plan gift where he's doing this because he wants to participate in a certain level of giving. Again, and his cost will be about $3,000 to $4,000 a year for 10 years. So that's pretty significant. But he was actually very pleased with that because he didn't have $100,000 to just give now, but he wanted to be at the $100,000 level, and this was a way for him to do it. Okay, so this is probably why you're on the presentation. I want to hear a little about some of the changes that came down. I've picked a few changes. When the first time I gave this presentation, I had a bunch more, and I realized that they weren't applicable to most people. So I'll try to cover some of the basic ones and mention some of the possible other changes that happened. And if you have other questions, you can get through the staff, and they'll track me down. And I can answer further questions. Okay, so first change, just so you know, hopefully you know about this if it affects you. The RMD, the required minimum distribution age, is now higher. It was recent in 2019, it was knocked up to age 72 from 70 and a half. That had been 70 and a half for many, many years. Or I have, as far as I don't know, 20, 30 years or longer. I don't even know how long it was 70 and a half. Now they bumped up to 72. They're going to give you a little more time so you don't have to start taking your required distributions out of your retirement accounts until now you're 72. Now that was the new rule. There's even the newer rule, which just came in effect this year, is now it's age 73. So if you're turning age 73 this year, this would be your first year of RMDs, but I'll explain to you how that'll play out for you in a second. And then they're going to bump it up again to age 75 in 2033. Every time I see 10 years out, there's a rule when it comes to these legislation, anything affecting revenue, they can't go beyond. There's a rule when they use the way they pass these bills, they have to have a 10-year window. So everything's within 10 years. So the truth is, I'm not even going to worry about what's going on in 10 years because there'll be different presidents and different Congresses. Things will change during that time period. But if nothing changes, the RMD requirements will bump up to age 75 in 2033. Why is this important? Well, what this shows us is that the government has really decided, this is actually bipartisan. Hard to believe there's something bipartisan out there, because they passed one during the Trump administration that just passed additional similar expansion of these rules during the Biden administration. So the Congress is interested in people having bigger retirement accounts, having more money savings for retirement. for, a couple reasons. People need it, and the other reason being the government makes more money in the long run with the more money you have in retirement accounts. So that's the trend. Now, just to mention, if you start to take your RMDs, you can't stop. So the government has to really never once they know you're going to get their taxable income, you can't undo it. So sometimes you can undo things, but not with RMDs. So once you've taken your first one, that's it. So I guess that's only practical if you're 73 this year. Think about this: if you're 73 this year and you take out your RMD now, and then you realize, oh, you're here. Jonathan's about to tell you that the first year of your RMDs, you don't actually have to take it out in that same calendar year. You can wait until April 1st of the following year. So you could have actually delayed taking the RMD to the following year. Why would you do that? Well, because maybe you don't want to pay income tax on it this year. You'd rather pay income tax on it next year. That's your choice. But if you took it already, you can't put it back in and delay it to the next year. So that's a little rule that's out there. Now, let's say if you're turning 72 in 2023, just so how to play this out, just so everyone understands how this works. You either take your first RMD by the end of the following year, because again, 2024 is a year of your first RMD. Then, so you have that first year, or you could delay it to April 1st of the following year. That's what I was saying. There's this in the first year RMDs, you can delay it till April 1st of the following year. But if you delay it, you'll still have to take the second year RMD in that same year. So let's say in this case, you decide to wait until April, end of April, beginning of, let's say March 2025 to take your first RMD. You still have to take your the second year RMD, the 2025 one, the year that you're turning 74 for in this example, in the same year. So actually, that's not such a great result, because you may not want to pay double, you pay tax on both distributions. Maybe you'd rather spread it out over 2 tax years. And obviously, if you've started your RMDs and you're older than this, it doesn't really apply to you. But again, just if you're around this age, it's important to understand this. Your IRA retirement account custodians will obviously tell you how much your RMDs are. Interesting penalties for missing the RMDs. They're very significant. They were really, I hadn't even thought about it, and I worked on this presentation. I realized, wow, I didn't realize it was that high. So if you, in the past, if you had missed your RMD in the year you're supposed to take it, it was a 50%, it was basically 50% of the RMD himself. Let's say you had a $10,000 required minimum distribution, that's short for RMD. And then you missed it, you'd owe an additional $5,000 on top of it as a penalty, which is really onerous. Now, that was the prior law. New law is now they dropped the penalty to 25%, which I still feel is pretty onerous. And they have a correction. I haven't looked at the details of the correction. If you correct it in a timely fashion, it's probably within like 60 days. I'm just guessing. It gets reduced, the penalty gets reduced to 10% of their RMD. So they give a little more flexibility there. But my advice is just, I'm not going to focus on the penalties. I'll just say, take your RMDs when you're supposed to take them in the time period that you are supposed to take them. Okay, so here's a bunch of different changes. I'm not going to go through all these lists. Basically, this is, again, what I mentioned already, is that they're trying to give people more opportunities to build bigger retirement accounts. So these are various different types of retirement accounts. They're all similar in respect that the money that's in these funds are the money that in these accounts are pre-tax money, all be taxable when you take it out. Now, the contribution limits, you can see there's going up a little bit here, 2,000 for this first type employee contribution. There's a catch-up. Catch-up is when you're over age 50, they give you a little more leeway to add additional money into your retirement accounts, whether it's your 401k or 403b or for your traditional IRA. Both of them, in fact, the catch-up limit is $1,000 additional. So let's say I'm 55 years old. 2023, I can put in now I can put in $6,500 into my IRA. That's up $500 from the previous year, and I can do another $1,000 and sort of put the catch-up. So I can put in $7,500, and this applies to all these different accounts. I mentioned pre-tax money, except for anything that's a Roth. The Roth is after-tax money, and that's why when you take money out of the Roth, it's completely tax-free. even the growth, all tax-free. So Roths are very important. So I'll just mention them here because I'm going to come up. There's a really important idea that you can walk away today with that you may be interested in doing. So again, a Roth IRA is, I like to describe a picture of, I saw a cartoon of a big tree and a huge tree and a guy sitting on the guy underneath the tree saying, imagine I only pay tax on the seed. So that applies to a Roth IRA. It doesn't apply to a regular IRA. So if the picture was in a regular IRA, it'd be like, I got a tax deduction on the seed, but I got to pay tax on the entire tree. So, but when it comes to Roth, it's you only pay tax on the seed itself, and the entire growth is all going to be tax-free to you and to your heirs. Very, very important. So I know it's hard. Most people like to take a tax break up front because that's just sort of the traditional way people look at these things. But once you think about the possibilities for a Roth IRA, the earlier they're started, the more growth you have. And really what I'm talking about is, let's say for grandchildren, why not set up a Roth IRA? And I'm going to show you in a second. Even for a small amount, let it grow over 50 years. It can be a very large, pretty significant retirement, or just for living, a tax-free pool of funds for living in later in life for a grandchild or a child. So very important to know about these things. Now, and this is why I want to talk about Roths in particular. Now, I'm not going to go into, there were other details, there were other changes to Roth IRAs. Basically, a lot of the employee plans now can have Roth options, but I decided not to talk about those because that's up to the companies who want to ask. If the companies want to add some Roth option to a 401k or 403b, they can. But again, you have to talk to your HR people, see if they're going to do anything. All right, question. Can the retirement contribution limits chart be made available for you? Yes. So what we're going to do, thank you for the question. Yes, what we'll do is I'll ask the staff to share this presentation. So you'll have that. You have the whole presentation. Yes, so thank you for asking the question. And now I know I'll see the little thing when if somebody asks a question, I'll be notified. Okay, so back to Roths. And now what does Roths have to do with the 529 plan? Now, what is the 529 plan? I have a definition here for that. Just so we all know where we're at. So 529 plans are these college savings programs. Now they've been expanded. These are where they're similar to an IRA account where you put funds in. Now it's no tax break. So it's like just a contribution after tax dollars goes in. Growth is all no taxation on growth. And if the money is spent for the purposes of education, and usually you started with college, now it can actually start with even elementary school education. All the withdrawals are tax-free. So that's a nice plan. My father, I like to give an example. My father, as I had children, each child, my father put in $500 a year for each child in a Fidelity College account. It's a 529 account. And so this was a very nice plan. And then my kids each hit 18. We've used those funds to fund really the first year of college. All my children so far I've gone to Israel for a year, and that's also been equivalent for in their first year of college. So that worked out pretty well. And so that's a 529 plan. Now the question always comes up with the 529 plans is what happens if the leftover money in there? My kids, each of their accounts still have some money in it. My father actually keeps, he's in his mid 80s. He does keep still adding $500 a year. So it's still, even though we spent most of the money, he keeps putting some more money in there each year for all the grandchildren. And this brand new rule, I'm very excited about this, is going to apply to me and my kids. So what is this new rule? What was the money that's not been spent on the 529 plan? Now if there's a significant amount of money in there, there are ways to move it to a different child. You can't move it to yourself because again, all the growth has been basically tax-free, not tax growth. If you take it to yourself, you should have to pay tax on that. But you can move it to maybe another child. But another option, which is brand new in the new law, take a look at this carefully. Unspent 529 college savings plan funds can now be rolled into a Roth IRA. Not for yourself, has to be for the beneficiary, for the child, the grandchild. There are limits. Now, the maximum is $35,000. I know why they put a maximum on this, because if this was a higher maximum or no maximum at all, hold on one second. What would have happened? The planners of the world said, dump millions of dollars into these accounts and get it all to the grandchildren, and then they'll have this huge amounts of tax, all tax exempt, no taxation on the growth, no taxation withdrawals. There's somebody who funded his Roth with like very stock that shot up. He's got billions of dollars in a Roth account. Government's regretting that one. There's nothing you can do, but he just found a way to work it. So in this case, they put a limit on it, 35,000. That's limit number one. So you can, that's and number two, the plan. So the beneficiaries have to move it from that 529 plan to the Roth IRA. So as what we'll do with my father's, the Roth for my kids that my father set up, we'll create accounts at Fidelity. That's where they happen to be. We'll create Roth accounts for each kid, and then we'll, whatever's left over in those 529 accounts will move into a Roth for my kids. And so it's just a nice, that's a legacy gift for my parents and my kids. That's just a nice idea. Now hold on. And now they look at this. Now the plan has to be open for 15 years. So for my kids, it works out perfectly because they opened it as soon as they were born, these accounts were opened up. So they're all over 15 years old from their older children. I have a 10-year-old also who's not yet there, but again, he'll get to the 15-year mark soon enough. And what's interesting is that, and this is really up to my father. I mean, I don't know what he's going to do, but he could actually just like a couple $1,000s in each account once they've spent most of the money to go to Israel for a year. He could actually add more, as much as he wants, and he's not going to add hundreds of thousands of dollars, but he could add 10, 20,000. He could even max it out if he wanted to, 35,000. So even though, so there's no time frame of when you can put the money in. So as long as the account's been open for 15 years. So my suggestion is, if there are any younger children in the family, for your children or grandchildren, open an account, put $500, a couple $100 in there, so you actually have an account, so you can start the time limit for 15 years. And then at some point, you can roll over whatever's in that, still in that 529 plan. You can even add funds to it later on, and then you can roll those funds right into the Roth for up to 35,000. So I feel that's a really cool idea. This is again for parents and grandparents, probably grandparents. Okay, so let's talk about the Legacy IRA Act. This is brand new. Also, this was an omnibus package. This is an intersection between IRAs and planned giving, my field. Okay, so first, before I talk about that specific new rule, if you haven't noticed, there's been the ability to make charitable gifts to nonprofits, like qualified nonprofits, Worker Circle, other similar organizations that are listed on the tax exempt listing for the IRS. So, and this has been around for a while now. You may not have noticed this. So this is when you hit age 70 and a half. I know it's a little different than the RMD rule. The RMD is now 73, but this rule is still 70 and a half. So when you hit age 70 and a half, you can now make your charitable gifts out of your IRA account. And you should say, well, why would I want to do that? Well, there's a couple of reasons. Well, firstly, it's not going to be taxed, which is important. So one of the challenges people have is they build really nice, sizable IRAs or other retirement accounts and then roll them into IRAs, but knowing that all the money's going to be taxed unless you can either do a beneficiary designation upon your passing, part or all of an account would go to a charity, or you can now give up to 100,000. I mean, I say 100,000. Don't be scared by the numbers. Like $1,000 or 2,000, whatever you like. You can make a gift from your IRA account directly to a charity. It is no taxation on it. Gifts do have to go directly from the IRA account to the charity, so you have to ask your IRA plan administrator how to do this. There's just forms online, easy forms these days. And if you're already 73 and you're taking your RMDs already, any gifts to charity up to 100,000, of course, will actually count for your RMD, which is kind of an interesting point. So if you're 73 or older, you can use this if you don't need the RMDs for your daily living, and you'd rather not pay tax on an RMD because they're forcing you to pay tax on it. You could send it to a charity, and you can do part or whole. That's no problem with that. And what's nice is that if you're not an itemizer anymore, I crunch all the data every year on U.S. taxpayers that they can withdraw. I download Excel spreadsheets from the IRS website, and I can see I see over 90% of U.S. tax filers are over 90% are not itemizers. So it's not a bad thing because the personal exemption is very high. It's over 15,000 a person. So you might not need to be an itemizer, but what that does mean is you're really not getting any benefit from your charitable giving if you're not an itemizer. So you might as well think about if you check with your accountant, if you're not sure, just ask your accountant, am I an itemizer still? Because a lot of us, we don't look at our tax returns that closely. And they might say, no, you're not. Well, think about making all charitable gifts out of your IRA account, because that is a tax benefit. You're not going to be taxed on those funds coming out of your IRA if they're going directly to charity. Okay, and this $100,000 limit is an annual limit. You can for as many charities you want, but you can't go over 100,000 total dollar-wise for all the charities you want to give to in 1 year. Husband and wife each get their own limit, so it could be husband and wife could be 200,000 actually, and that's going to be increased. Okay, so listen, let's see what there's a good question here. Please pardon my paranoia, but is there any way the government can assess the trillions of dollars in retirement funds besides raising the RMD in order to? Well, the answer really is, I mean, I don't know if it solves the national debt, but the future for this country, I think Congress, when they're thinking about, there is a pretty big debt, but they also know there's trillions and trillions of dollars that's going to be taxed in the IRAs. But the interesting question is, why would they make it later for you to have to take your required distributions? If you took them earlier, the government get money earlier. So I don't will it solve national debt issues? I don't know. It's a good question. But the government's not stupid. The people involved, some of them are pretty stupid, but a lot of them are not. They know that this is a big money for them, but they also know that it's really important for people to save for retirement. So that's a bigger burden. If people don't have money for retirement, the government has to step in and pay. So as we know with Medicaid issues. Okay, thank you for the question. It's a good question. Okay, so this 100,000 limit will go up. Now, what is the Legacy IRA Act? So in my field, over 20 years ago, I worked for UJA National. It was called United Jewish Communities back then. And I was already, there was legislation ready to be signed that was going to allow individuals not only to make a direct charitable gift from the IRA, which I just described, but to create what's called a charitable gift annuity. And it took 20 years to get this law passed. Oh, okay. I see a question. I'm just going to answer the question real quick. What is the actual process for taking your IRA? Does the custodian contact you automatically? I'm only 55 years old, so I haven't had it, but I believe that they're in touch with you. My advice is, don't wait till the last minute. Contact them to see what your requirement distributions are. How do you get them to send the contribution to your chosen charity? They all have forms to do this. So you contact them and say, I want to make a direct charitable gift out of my IRA. What's the forms? And chances are they're online forms. So that's been my experience. I've guided people in that direction. So it seems to work. If you have more trouble with it, you can get through to me through the Worker Circle staff, and we'll see if we can help you if you have trouble with that. Okay, so now the new rule is once you're 70 and a half and older, you can also establish what's called a charitable gift annuity. Now I'm going to explain to you what that is. And you could use IRA funds. That's the new rule. So, and this would be, again, there'd be no taxation as an IRA withdrawal. It would also still count towards your RMDs. Interesting. You get a fixed lifetime annuity. So it's like literally a single payment lifetime annuity contract, basically, but it's being actually issued by a charity. Worker Circle will use a charity, a foundation called the National Gift Annuity Foundation, because they're a very big pool of the 50, 60, 70 million dollars in other annuities. So they're able to manage this. So it's actually issued by this other independent charity because they have a lot of expertise in this area. And they so the income is fixed for life, whatever your age is, whatever the standard rates are, you get a fixed annuity. I'll show you what the rates are in a second. Now, this option to fund a gift annuity with an IRA money they put it down as a once in a life opportunity. So if you like the idea, you can do it only once under current law, but maybe they'll change that. And the maximum funding amount is $50,000. All right, so I just wanted to show you. So this is just a little rate chart. This is just some examples of rates. The key to doing these things is that these rate charts are set by a national association. And so National Gift Annuity Foundation doesn't play around with this. They will not negotiate. Some other charities might, but it's not recommended for either side. And that's, so let's say, I'll show you an example in a second, what a gift annuity, how a regular gift annuity just funded with cash will look like, and then what an IRA annuity would look like. Oh, so here's a standard gift annuity. I use age 75. The chart says you're age 75, you get 6.6%. It doesn't matter whether you're a man or a woman. 20,000 happens to be the minimum for the National Gift Annuity Foundation. So they won't do this for less than 20,000. So it's a minimum size gift. So for 20,000, I say cash, meaning a check, obviously not cash in an envelope, would create a fixed annuity. You'd get in this case on $20,000, you'd get $1,320 fixed payments a year, usually in quarterly payments. That's typically how it's done. It could be actually done monthly or biannually or even annual payments. And you get income tax deduction on this type of gift. Again, this is funded with cash. So you get income tax deduction of $9,291, which is worth, it's worth $1,000, $2,000 around that amount back in terms of tax savings if you're an itemizer. No, it's still the same issue I mentioned already. And part of this in annual payments is going to be tax-free for the first 12.4 years. That's really 12.4 years is the life expectancy, standard life expectancy for female life expectancy, actually for age 75. So, and if you go beyond life expectancy, it'll just be all taxes, ordinary income, regular income. All right, so this is the picture of a standard annuity. If you you could do one of these. We've several supporters of the Worker Circle have done these, and they get their payments, and they got a deduction, and they get some tax-free income. Great. So now you can actually fund this with IRA funds. So here's the IRA funded annuity, and this is starting at age. I used the same example, age 75, but now what I did is I crossed out things that are a little different. And I added some things. So number one, there's no income tax deduction. The reason being is that you're by not paying taxes on the 20,000 of coming out of your IRA, that's equivalent of a tax deduction. So that you can't get a new deduction. The payments stay the same, $1,320. There's no tax-free income because that's just a new rule. Again, back to the comment we had a second ago. This is another way the government thinks they might actually make some money here because this will be more taxable income. The $20,000 or whatever amount you decide to put into an annuity is counts towards your RMD, and the payments are guaranteed for life. What's really nice about this idea, if you like this idea, is that this won't run out. So your IRA could run out of money. You could spend it, but this would be just a fixed annuity for however long you live. You can live to 100, or you can live longer, 120 if you want, and you still get paid your annuity. Just want to hold on one second. I just want to make sure no other questions here. Great. Okay, so this is this is the IRA funded annuity. So there's two options on annuities. You can create a charitable gift annuity with cash, or you can create a IRA funded annuity with funds from IRA. You could also do stock. I'm not going to get into it today, but there's if you want to avoid capital gains, there's a way to do it with stock also. But that changes the numbers slightly. Okay, now last section is the lightest section. I hope I didn't go too fast or forget anything. So you can have questions. You can reach out to me and get questions to me. All right, so I finally am qualified to move to Century Village. So I've decided to think about my legacy, even though I have a 10-year-old, but the reality is as I get older, I've realized now what it means to think about family and history and community. And so it's, even though I've been in this business for actually over 25 years, the introduction from Ann at the end, it's old, it's 3 years old, so now it's over 25 years. 25 years ago, I left law practice to get into Planned Giving. Anyway, so what I found, I was trying to think of different ways to describe what's a legacy. But I like this picture of a drop and the ripples, and really and to think about that beyond our life. Really, that's really what we're talking about. And that's drop or whatever it is, this ripples out and has impact not just on family, community. So I found a book. I'm not going to quote the exact book I read, but I read a book on legacies. I didn't include all the different arrows, but essentially we're talking about your legacy, meaning your mainly your family or your beliefs, values. So the organizations, the value, your values and the organization's values, you want those to be preserved for the future. That's an organization you might think about a legacy gift with, and not just a regular annual gift or whatever charitable gift, but something more deeper than just writing a check. Experiential bonds is where, like I'm starting to realize every time now that most of my kids are really out of the house, like to come home, I'm starting to realize the value. Wow, everyone to get together. This was mainly my in-laws, my parents always, relished the opportunity to get together as family. I was just too busy to worry about this, but now I'm still busy, but now I'm starting to think about these things and took a family trip. We took, even though I couldn't afford it, we took a trip to Israel in December. One of my daughters is again in her year after college, gap year in Israel, a year before college in Israel. So we did it. I am still paying it off, but it was worthwhile because it's memories, experiential bonds with family, community impact. Again, this is more in terms of how what impact you want to make on the world, or those organizations, those people that are important to you. Stories, making sure the family gets the stories. I did all the genealogical research on my family. As one of my lines, my father's line, I got back into the 1600s. But I had to all in big folders, and I have to hand it over to somebody, find which of my kids cares about this. Systems living. I think systems living means teaching my kids how to, I'm the main earner for the whole family, and I'm teaching them about getting jobs. Anyway, just ideas about thinking about your legacy. Really the point of these slides, last couple of slides, is think about your legacy. If you don't think about it, time will go by and you won't address it, but it could be too late. So do as much as you can while you're here alive. Have a will. That's sort of the baseline about a legacy, and think about charitable causes in your will, things that are important to you, communicating your life's passions. You can do that in a will. I know it's a boring document. I draft them all the time. But you can also put in that this is something that's important to me. Tell the lawyer, I want, not only do I want to name a charity, I want to say why I'm giving to that charity. Make sure your planning papers are up to date and can be found by loved ones. This is just basic planning, because you can do all the legacy planning in the world, but if the papers are not found or not entrusted to people who you want to find them, there may not be much. Your plans may not come to fruition. I hate to use an example, but whoever, if you pass away, and whoever comes into your apartment or your house after you pass away has to find these documents. I once had a case where a friend of my wife's, older woman, passed away, and my wife just felt like, she used to call every Friday before Shabbat, and she felt sad, so she called her like the week after she passed away. She called the apartment. I don't know why my wife did it, and her niece picked up, and I realized that whatever, all of her wills, whatever, if the niece is there, she might just pick the will. If the woman probably kept all of her wills. You're supposed to throw out your will. When you do a new will, you're supposed to X out, void, and actually throw away all your old wills. But if you don't do that, then whoever finds it can pick the one that favors them the most. So just beware. So you really want to have somebody who trust and knows where the documents are. Maybe you leave with an attorney, but maybe you make sure that close family relatives know where it is. You might have to choose the right people to help implement your legacy, and you should tell them about it. So this is a big question that comes up often. I see there's a question. I'm going to wait to the end to answer that question about the IRA, because I'm almost done here. Anyway, again, find the right people to implement your legacy plan, and of course, tell them. Again, have the inventory. It's so important to have an inventory of your assets. This is just, can't stress it more. And methods to fund it. Well, number one, set up your legacy gift now. I mean, if you're thinking about doing something, you can include your charitable ideas in your will, living trust, other testamentary types of gifts. You could do it through a retirement account, beneficiary designation, again, to organizations that mean a lot to you. Share and think about sharing these ideas with the staff. Quite often, people are very private about their estates. But if you're including a nonprofit, including a worker circle in your plans, you don't have to give them all the details, but you should tell them. It's helpful for them, the organization, to know. And sometimes you have something specific that you want to happen. You may have a separate agreement what you'd like to see happen, maybe speakers, there's some sort of programs you want to support, something. So that stuff can be done while you're live. Okay, so last takeaways, and I'll answer this one more question I see there, and then we'll take more questions. Okay, number one, feel free to reach out to us. Any potential retirement law changes that we talked about or didn't talk about, feel free to reach out to the staff at Work Circle, and they'll look at the questions to me. My advice, just start thinking, acting about your own personal legacy. I just started it. I'm way behind, I think, but I'm starting in my mid-50s, and it's time to think about these things. And make sure your basic planning documents are in order and they're findable. Okay, so I'm gonna stop the share, and I see some questions and some chats. So let's see. I had a question here. Okay, because the Legacy IRA is a once in a lifetime charitable gift annuity, would $50,000 have to be in 1 year? Oh, so it's a good question. I think it's a one time between 20 and 50,000. I don't believe you can be able to do it more than once. That's I'm not 100% sure of that, but I'm pretty sure that's what it means. So the minimum is 20, the maximum is 50. You pick that number. Now, I have a hope that the IRA legacy rule will change, and it seems almost kind of like silly to say it's only you could do it once, but that's what the rule is. That's the question. Any other questions? I'm looking for the chats. Is anything else in the chat here? Okay, regarding the options of tax-free giving, are there any advantages to forming a foundation? Does giving from a foundation have to be in cash? So the answer, okay, so I'll answer the question first part first. That's a really good question. Advantages for a private foundation. I've been involved. Actually, the family wealth office I work on, I'm involved with 2 foundations for them. It's one family, and I've been answering questions about foundations for over 20 years. Private foundation is a big undertaking. That's why it is a really beautiful thing. But I would say in the millions of dollars at a minimum to think about a private foundation. Why do I say that such a high number to kick off a private foundation? Well, there are costs. There's legal costs. There's ongoing legal. There's ongoing accounting. There are strict rules in terms of how to invest the funds. You can't invest in companies that you have over 20% control interest in. If you do fund it with those types of companies, you have to divest within 5 years, and there's rules upon rules. And if you miss those rules, the penalties are very onerous. But the main reason I'm mentioning that only when you get to a certain level should, multi-millions or higher, should you be thinking about a private foundation, because nowadays donor advised funds are so flexible and they offer you so many options. My advice is, if you're thinking about it, it is very convenient to have a separate fund that you could put stock or whatever you want in there, liquidate it, and then it won't be taxed in the donor advised fund, and then distribute it as you wish. You could distribute it anonymously, you could distribute it not anonymously. And in fact, most donor advised funds, the Fidelity's, Jewish Communal Fund, Foundation for, FJC, it used to be called Foundation for Jewish Community, now it's just called FJC. Those are based in New York. Those Jewish Communal Fund, FJC. The Jewish federations have the donor advised funds around the country, community foundations also. They usually give you options for investing. And if you have a substantial fund, they may give you a lot more flexibility than you would imagine. So I think nowadays the donor advised funds have come along so far that I'm not sure that they really seem, in most cases, you're better off just doing donor advised fund. But in any case, if you do create a foundation and you staff it properly, you have the accounting help and you have investment help, and you make it a sort of family activity, which is beautiful. It's great. It's great. Now, does giving from the foundation have to be in cash? No, does not need to be in cash. Does not need to be in cash. I've told this family that I do work for here, I'm in their offices, I've begged them, they have stock that they should really have just divested many years ago. Still, they have control stock. And I keep telling them, just give the stock to nonprofits. And they haven't listened to me. So maybe someday they'll listen to me. So yeah, you can distribute stock. Most foundations distribute cash, but you can distribute, and the value would go count. A private foundation has a minimum distribution payment of 5% of the funds each year. So you can distribute cash, or something of value would just have to be valued, and it would count towards the 5%. So that's one advantage of donor advised funds over private foundations. Donor advised funds do not have a 5% distribution requirement. Okay, so I hope that answers those questions, but again, thank you for the question. Okay, Ann, anything else here? Any other questions or comments from people? I want to thank everybody for sticking it out.
Yeah, thank you all. And if you didn't see it in the chat, we'll be sending the recording of this presentation to everyone tomorrow, I believe, along with other information related to what you've just learned. So thank you so much for joining us. And thank you, John.
One more question. Somebody asked a question.
Oh, okay.
What is your opinion of giving some of your children's inheritance before your death? Oh, good question. The family I do, family wealth office I do work for, the children are now into their 40s, somebody or 40s, 20s, 30s, 40s, have a lot of children, and they still have not given the inheritance to the kids. I spent all this time creating the inheritance for the kids, and tens of millions. Each kid's got tens of millions, but so it really, I think that the rule of thumb, obviously depending on the circumstances, is to be a little cautious and make sure that the children develop the right attitude towards funds. And I think this family I do work for, they actually, all the children except for one have been very cautious and don't demand anything. They just, they come to me sort of asking, what's in the account. I can't tell them. I'm not, I know that's a no-no. I said, just ask your father, and he'll so you want a new house in Israel, wherever you can get a house. But I would say you have to think it out very carefully, because obviously giving a lot of wealth to a younger person might not be helpful for them. So, but ultimately, I think we're in my family wealth office work. I think ultimately they're at the point where, like, well, when are you going to give it to them? When they hit retirement age? So the family's not lacking. The kids are doing fine. But it's but at a certain point, they're adults. Let them take over. So usually in their 30s, is by at that point, they should be ready. Sometimes the person's never ready, so you have to make that call yourself, whether the child or grandchild is ready to handle wealth. So it's good. It's a good course to teach. I've never been taught that because I'm not, not in that category, and I just follow instructions here for this family. So anyway, good question though. Thank you.
Thank you, Jonathan. And also the slides are going to be provided to everyone email tomorrow. So stay tuned, and thank you for joining us.
One last question. Someone said, would you recommend a trust? So the answer is yes. Trusts are very important. So if there's a potential inheritance issue, I work with about 30 different trusts at this one family wealth office. So trusts are a way for asset protection, for also has to be drafted carefully. You have to find a law firm to draft it for you. But yes, trusts can be very, very helpful in many aspects. So again, you in case there's some problems later down the road, the trustee is there to sort of be a buffer, and the funds are sort of protected. And so trusts tend to be the way to go in terms of once you get to that level of estate planning, higher level. Okay, thank you, everybody. I think that
have everyone enthralled, and with good reason, because it's all about retirement and the legacy you leave. So thank you, Jonathan. I'm sure we'll be scheduling more programs with.
We have one in the fall scheduled, so I think
there we go. We've already got it on, and
come back in the fall
calendar. Yeah, and keep an eye on all of the Workers Circle programs, because there's a lot to enjoy and a lot to learn. Thank you all, and have a wonderful rest of your Wednesday. And again, thank you, Jonathan. Be well.
Thank you, everybody, for being on too. Okay, thanks. Bye.